What's up, guys? We're back with episode 692 of the New York Knicks podcast. Talking to you guys right after the Knicks have made their first finals in our lifetime, in all our lifetimes. I think so. There's obviously a lot of emotions going on. I've seen a couple of videos going around on social media about what the state of New York is. I know Perry is in New York, Myles is in close proximity, but let's kick it off. How are you guys feeling?
Honestly, and me and Myles were talking a little bit before we started. I mean, of course I'm happy. But I think I kind of knew this was going to happen for like a little while now, just based on the way pretty much every opponent we've played has played. So not as excited as you'd think, and also like losing a final series would just be like so heartbreaking. So there's still that in the back of my mind. But overall, like the way we've been playing, I'm of course very happy with, and just the fact that this is the furthest I've ever seen a Knicks team go in my life. It's hard to feel anything but happy or excited.
Yeah,
Myles?
ditto to that. The Knicks' last finals appearance, I think it was in 1999. Was it against the Spurs? I'm not totally
Yep.
sure about that, but regardless, been a long time coming. We've seen a handful of decent Knicks teams. We've seen the Knicks in and out of the playoffs. A lot of us grew up on Carmelo Anthony and Amari Stoudemire and David Lee, if that was your time for a little while. And so it's really refreshing to see a Knicks team that has maybe 4 or 5 players just as good as the second best player on most Knicks teams in our lifetime.
Yeah. For me, when I go back to how people were talking about the Knicks after game 3 in the first round, this seemed almost impossible. I know it was only 3 weeks. I know we've talked about this before, but it's been such an upward trajectory since then. I think that everyone should take a moment to really, sit back and enjoy the fact they made a finals. No matter who comes out of the West, the Knicks probably aren't going to be favorite, and you can't take anything for granted. We might not see another finals for another 2 decades or in the next 25 years. Hopefully not, knock on wood, but just take a second and be appreciative. Before we get on to some wider implications, let's talk about the game. The Knicks blow out the Cavs in game 4. Very, very similar to how it was against the Sixers in round 2. I think the final score was 130-93, a 37-point win, and the Knicks just blew the doors off them. So let's talk about the game real quick. What were your guys' biggest takeaways?
Here, Perry, I'll interject first. So the Knicks won the first quarter by a score of 38-26, then won the second quarter 30-23. The third quarter, again, a victory for the Knicks 30-22, and then finally in the fourth 32-22. The Cavaliers didn't stay in it for any of these quarters against the Knicks.
Yeah, this game didn't really tell us much that we didn't already know about the Knicks or the Cavs. Pretty much what it's been all series since game 1. Just complete domination by the Knicks. Third straight elimination game where the Knicks have held a 45-plus point lead. Just like genuinely like absurd domination, especially in, like I said, those closeout games. And that is one thing that a lot of people are saying about how weak the East is, how bad the Knicks opponents are, whatever. They're 40 balling all of these teams. There's not much more the Knicks can do. So
In elimination games too.
Exactly. So that doesn't really worry me as much as like a lot of people are saying. Like I'm not really concerned with who we've beat or who we haven't beat. There's teams in front of us, and we destroy them. Not much more this team can do to show that they're in that top tier of teams, like the Thunder and the
You can only
Spurs.
beat who's in front of you. Yeah, you can only beat who's in front of you. I think anyone now who thinks the Knicks don't stand a chance against the West, whoever comes out of the West, is really kidding themselves. I think the Knicks have shown way more than enough in these past 10 games that at the very least they have a puncher's chance and probably are more closer to 50-50 with whoever comes out of the West, in my opinion. But about the game, for me, I think the one person I really want to highlight first, and we can get on to a lot of the players or talk about them throughout the series, Landry Shamet. Today and throughout the series, it goes back to game 1 and it goes to basically throughout the series. He shot the lights out of the ball. And for me, he was just a standout player. He was a standout performer. He was a plus 28. I'm looking at the box score right now. And for me, he's the guy that's really come on and really defined the Knicks' last 10 games.
Yeah, we're talking about a guy who signed with the Knicks on a veteran minimum contract in September, right before the season started, because the Knicks were waiting on decisions from guys like Ben Simmons, and then I think they favored Malcolm Brogdon to him, didn't they?
Before his retirement.
Yeah, nobody, not even the Knicks, knew that this is what we'd be getting from Shamet. But at some point midway through the season, Mike Brown really gave him some props for being the best pick defender, the best on-ball screen defender on the team, and on a team with McHale and with OG Anunoby, that was a really loud quote. And he's really looked like one of the best two-way players on the Knicks. Totally automatic from three.
Yeah, and giving us, I've spoke about this a lot, giving us that movement shooter as well as something on offense that's been huge for us, giving us another layer of our offense. And he was the Knicks' preferred defender on Donovan Mitchell this series. In times where him and Hart shared the court, especially today in Game 4, he was the one on Donovan Mitchell, which also just shows both the coach and the rest of the players' trust in his defense. And I think he'll be another huge piece in the finals against whatever team that we end up playing.
Especially if the Knicks end up playing the Thunder. The Thunder give up a lot of threes, especially a lot of corner threes. We saw Landry Shamet hit that one in Game 1 where it bounced in, out, all around the rim, off the backboard, and landed in. He's going to have a big part to play in the finals, like you said, Perry. I agree with that. But maybe we can even take a step back because we haven't talked at all throughout this series. So maybe we want to take a step back to when we actually felt the Knicks were going to the finals. For me, I'm being honest, I really felt the Knicks were going to the finals as soon as Game 1 ended. When the Cavs are already the worst team and you blow a game like that, you just can't afford to do that. It reminded me a little bit of the Knicks in Game 1 last year in the Eastern Conference Finals, except this Knicks team is a lot better than that Knicks team was a lot better than this Cavs team. But let's talk about Game 1 for a sec, because I think that's where the series really ended.
I think, if I'm being completely honest with you, and this again was something that me and Myles were talking about before, Brunson winning conference finals MVP, of course, our best player. We don't go anywhere without him. But to me, the only really competitive game was Game 1. And that was because we were in a 20, 25 point hole. And he brought us back. He was very clearly the reason we won that game. And I think, honestly, he deserves that ECF MVP because of that performance. Anything other than that, you could say McHale had a great series. Cat really didn't. I think he scored like 15 a game or something. But I mean, again, he's another one of our better players. OG, even Landry Shamet, who shot 93% from three. We had a lot of guys contribute. Not saying we had a lot of guys in contention for the award, but I think the award being given to Brunson is fully justified because of that Game 1 performance. And he did what he's done since he came here. He put the team on his back when we really needed him to.
Right. And when I think of Game 1, I think about that Mike Brown decision to rock with Landry Shamet over Josh Hart near the end of the game and into overtime. And obviously Shamet hit those huge shots. But then after that big Game 1 victory, we see Josh Hart. I think he led the team in shot attempts in Game 2 because the Cavaliers' game plan was for Jared Allen to just sag off of him. And by maybe the 7th or 8th of Josh Hart's 11 three-point attempts, he got hot and hit 3 in a row. And then from that point on, you really started to see the holes in the Cavs' game plan. They really didn't have a solution for if Josh Hart was going to be an actual threat from the perimeter.
Yeah, I think those are all good points. And if I was giving my conference finals MVP, it would obviously be to JB also. But I also really want to highlight OG Anunoby. I know he's coming off a hamstring injury, and Game 1 he probably didn't look at 100%. But I feel every single game he's gotten more and more explosive and more with what we think about OG and how good OG was at the start of the playoffs. Are you guys worried about OG's hamstring in the finals at all, or are we fully happy with how he's looking?
I think he looks fine the way he's playing. I have noticed a couple times where he did land and he favored that hamstring a little bit. Obviously nothing too crazy if no coach is worried about it, no other player. OG's not worrying about it clearly. But again, with how re-injurable hamstrings are, it's always going to be a little bit of a concern in the back of my mind. But as of right now, there's not too much to worry about.
Yeah, my concern is that OG Anunoby needs to stay in game shape in this break that the Knicks might have, because lately he played 27 minutes tonight. And if you're an OG Anunoby better the last few games, you've been making out well, because he seems to outperform the expectations every single night. But I'm wondering when his defensive matchup becomes someone a little bit smaller or more athletic than the big man assignment he's had against the double big man Cavaliers lineup, I'm wondering if his stamina is going to be at all affected by his time missed and by these 2 long breaks between the Knicks sweeps.
Yeah.
That does worry me
OG...
a little bit. Sorry.
No.
I do think we did come out a little bit slow, a little bit flat in Game 1, which I would assume was in part due to the big break that we had. I hope that we handle it a little bit better now. And not really much you can do if you don't play basketball for that long, or you don't play in a game for that long. Of course, you're going to be a little bit rusty. I just hope that we can shake that rust off a lot quicker than we did in this series.
I think the Knicks are in great position to take home court from whoever they're playing in the finals. I think game one, the coaching game plan has to be a lot better than it was for game one against the Cavs. Maybe we can go back to this. Mike Brown has had a great playoffs, especially these last 10, 11 games. But if we go back to game one, I did not understand the trapping Harden at half court when he can't even get to the rim. He has no explosiveness left. He looks like he's on his last legs. What are you guys looking for in Mike Brown in the finals, and what do you guys think of his series overall?
I think he did have a great series. First, I want to talk about game one. We had OG Anunoby guarding Evan Mobley. And then after that game, he was on Jared Allen, which completely neutralized Allen as a screen setter and roller because, of course, it was just an easy switch between OG and McHale. I also liked this game. Jordan Clarkson did not play until garbage time minutes. I mean, he wasn't having a great series, but again, we were up 3-0. A lot of coaches and teams you would see get complacent in that kind of scenario, but Mike Brown was still making adjustments with no pressure or his back wasn't against the wall or anything. He was just making adjustments on his own with nothing forcing him to, which was something that I liked. I think, again, overall, I think he's outcoached every coach that we've faced so far. And he's winning my trust a lot in these playoffs, especially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Myles,
for
anything you
Mike
want to add?
Brown, yeah, I think that if you're someone that watched last year with Thibodeau, you understood his shortcomings. But if you're like me, you had some doubts about a defensive-minded coach like Tibbs walking away from Jalen Brunson because we saw that that Sacramento Kings team with De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis, and they really worked well together. And it was dribble handoff ball, and he really got the most out of those guys on offense. But when I looked at the team defensively, I was like, well, I hope that's not the defensive system that we're bringing to New York. But it turns out, in retrospect, it might have been damn impressive that Mike Brown won 50 something games of that Sacramento team. And maybe that's the perspective that we all should have had looking onto this.
Yeah, I think Mike Brown has answered a lot of the questions everyone had. And maybe some of the stretches in the regular season when he was playing lineups that we were questioning or that we didn't fully understand, I think you're seeing the dividends pay off now. You're seeing how he's really empowered a lot of the players off the bench. That the Knicks actually have so much more depth than last year. When you look at the roster, there's not really any significant changes. I think this is what I really love about Mike Brown's game, that this whole regular season, the best teams use the regular season as a way to tune for the playoffs. The Thunder, the Spurs, and the Knicks now. And I think that's what I'm really taking away from Mike Brown's first year in New York. And I think he's going to be the Knicks coach for a while.
I agree. And I think two things from this series that I think the Knicks need to carry over to whatever next series, whoever they play against next series, is number one, the defense was incredible. Again, just like it's been all playoffs. The second, third, fourth rotations, everybody's being helped out. Everybody's helping the helper. Genuinely some of the best team defense I've ever seen. And again, and something we definitely saw tonight was the fast break offense. 13 fast break points in the first quarter, I think, was a season high in the clinching game of the conference finals. That will be huge, which again is something that we've turned to in these playoffs. That's going to be huge to not only get us easy baskets, but to also neutralize both the Spurs and the Thunder's incredible defenses. If we can get out and get easy baskets without having to worry about Wemby in the paint or Caruso or Lou Dort or Chet or whoever, I think that's going to be a key to winning the next series. And I know I'm talking a lot about the next series. We haven't really covered this series yet, but it's hard not to think about that at this point.
Yeah, to talk about
All right, I think
tonight's game, one thing that I noticed from the Knicks defense is that when they got out to that 20-point lead, all of a sudden, Jalen Brunson guarding James Harden, Mike Brown and the Knicks felt comfortable leaving that matchup and daring James Harden to beat him one-on-one. And sometimes he did, but they're giving up little cuts one at a time on two-pointers rather than sagging off shooters.
you know what I also really wanted to highlight? I wanted to highlight Jalen Brunson having 0 turnovers today. I think that's a great way to neutralize the Thunder. The Thunder struggle in the half court. We saw it in game 4 of the Thunder Spurs series that if the Thunder aren't getting points off of turnovers or fast breaks, their half court offense leaves a lot to be desired. I think Brunson limiting his turnovers is going to be so critical in this next series. And he's done a great job because he's not giving the Cavs anything easy. And one thing I also wanted to highlight was people were talking about how Dean Wade was going to clamp Jalen Brunson, how he's going to stop Jalen Brunson. Dean Wade played 12 minutes today. He was basically unplayable by the end of the series. Yeah, maybe anything else that you guys want to touch on about the whole series? Any other players? we could talk about Mikal Bridges going 4 of 16 today. Not sure how someone could go 4 of 16 in a 37-point win and playing 30 minutes, but it happened.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is the first Mikal Bridges poor shooting night we've had in a long time. He was shooting 60, 40, 100, I believe, going into tonight, if I'm not mistaken. And he actually, even after tonight, leads all NBA players in their playoff field goal percentage on drives to the basket. So we're seeing, for any Knicks fan that watched all year, you understand how ironic that is. But he's really taken that next step.
yeah. There was a graphic they brought up towards the beginning of the game where Mikal had made 69 of his last 100 shots these playoffs, which is just absurd efficiency. And I have seen a lot of people saying, oh, there's Knicks magnet ball, like the shooting's not sustainable. Every shot is a wide open shot for a lot of these guys. Landry Shamet, he's not, of course, he's shooting 12 for 13 is not sustainable, but he's taking 13 wide open threes, and he's a very, very good shooter. Same thing with Mikal. A lot of his shots are just wide open right next to the hoop. If we continue to get open shots like this shooting is going to continue. And there is just one thing, since we didn't talk after game 3. At the beginning of the fourth quarter, we had a lineup of Cat surrounded by Hart, Mikal, Deuce, and Shamet. And the Cavs' first or second possession, Donovan Mitchell dribbled around 4 screens, and all 4 of those guys that I mentioned had switched onto him. He could not get an inch of room, and that was just something that I really liked. It was just a fun thing to watch. Having so many switchable guys that can really guard 1 through 4, especially with how small 4s are at this point. I think those are lineups that the Knicks can throw out, especially against a guy like SGA. And that's something I definitely would like to see.
It reminded me that we brought up that start of the fourth quarter in game 3. It reminded me a lot of the fourth quarter in game 1, where you saw that Donovan Mitchell went from, I think, did he score in that fourth quarter? Maybe he had 2 points, but he went from Donovan Mitchell being able to get to the rim and he was torching the Knicks on drives to it suddenly look like he didn't even want to play anymore, that he was, that he was kind of lackluster. He didn't have his explosiveness. And I know some things have come out that maybe he's been injured, but how much do you think of Donovan Mitchell and James Harden having relatively poor series? Do you think you can attribute to either injuries or age or bad coaching? And how much do you think you can attribute it to the Knicks defense?
So I'll take that one to start because I definitely have reservations about James Harden if I'm a Cavaliers fan sitting back watching him and Donovan Mitchell in the same backcourt on defense. But I have to stop for a second and give Donovan Mitchell some flowers for his shooting performance tonight. At one point, he was 5 for 8 from 3. He had, I don't remember how many points he finished with, but I know that he was
31.
31 points on 9 for 18 shooting. Yeah, that's a great night. And there's not much more that he could have done. He was the only thing tonight standing between what we saw and what we saw in that clinching game against Atlanta.
Yeah, there really wasn't much more Mitchell could have done, really, in any game. I guess in game 1, he did have 3 points in that fourth quarter. It didn't really seem like he wanted to shoot. And that's what I think the difference is between Brunson and Mitchell is just he's the kind of guy who shows up in those big games, and there really aren't many guys like that left. As for Harden, he just isn't the player he once was. He's not explosive. He's not as good of a shot maker.
He can't shoot.
Yeah, no, he can't. He shoots and it just doesn't go in. That's really most of what there is to it. He can't get to his floater as well as he used to be able to. He doesn't dribble as fast. And he does the same exact moves that he used to. He's not changed his game at all, which I think is pretty funny to watch. Him just doing the same moves, but basically in slow motion now. But of course, you have to give credit to the Knicks defense, and especially Mikal Bridges, who has now had 2 outstanding defensive series in a row, first on Maxey and now on Harden and a little bit on Mitchell.
Everyone played great team defense on Harden, whether it was Brunson, whether it was Hart. We're talking about a guy that annually led the entire NBA in assists per game. And I don't know how many he averaged this season, but I bet you it was a heck of a lot more than he put up in probably any game this series. He had 2 assists tonight and 5 turnovers, and that's all that's all credit to the defense that the Knicks guards played on him, because he has 2 big men and he has a handful of 40% three-point shooters. If you're on the outside looking in, what more could you ask for?
Yeah, Donovan Mitchell also had 4 turnovers to 1 assist, and that's where I think Donovan Mitchell's game really needs to. I know he's not a young player anymore, but that's something he can really improve on. When you turn him into just a scorer, he's not effective really in trying to facilitate or in other aspects of the game. If you look at SGA's game 3 against the Spurs, he had, I think, 12 assists to 2 turnovers while being trapped and double teamed. That's what the elite players can do. Again, like I mentioned before, Brunson, all right, he's not a pass first guard, he's not a facilitator per se, but he is underrated at getting the ball to his teammates in favorable positions. Maybe we can stay on the Cavs real quick before we write their obituary. What do you think is next for them? I don't see a way out of this. They've aligned their timeline with contending right now, and their players just don't seem to be able to do it at the highest level. I know there's been some talk of an Evan Mobley for a Giannis trade. Do you think that's something that's going to happen?
Even if it did, I'll take this one first, Perry. You can tag on to this, but there's just no way that in the modern NBA that you can win with having two guys play well over 30 minutes a game, every game, and not be able to shoot proficiently from 3-point range.
I agree. I don't really see any positive path for Cleveland. I don't think Donovan Mitchell is the number one on a championship team. I never have. Evan Mobley, I just don't see it with Evan Mobley. I mean, sure, defensive player of the year. This year he didn't make an all defensive team. I really didn't see much from him on defense. There was never a time where I was like, oh no, here comes Evan Mobley. We're not going to score. On offense, again, I don't see much out of him. I just don't really see much from Evan Mobley as a basketball player. I don't know what the hype is behind him. Jared Allen, not a great series.
Great game 1 though.
Yeah, game 1 he was very good, and I think towards the beginning of game 2 as well, he was getting a lot of offensive rebounds, but after that there just wasn't much on defense as well. Just nothing really. James Harden is going to be retired soon. He's not the player he once was either. They don't have much. I don't really see any way for them to go. Even Sam Merrill. I thought Sam Merrill was a pretty young guy. He's 30. They've got no current and they've got no future. There's just not much for them. Outside of Jalen Tyson, who I actually think is a pretty good player.
Right.
That's exactly what I wanted to touch on Jalen Tyson too. He didn't really have a big role in this series, and it's been a really weird playoffs for him because he had a great regular season. He was one of the feel-good stories for the Cavs, but he just hasn't had a good postseason at all. But do you think if the Cavs could go back in time, do you think they still do the Harden for Garland trade or not? Because they did make a conference finals, which is an achievement in its own. Sometimes people are so, if you don't win a ring or you don't make the finals, it's a bad season. I think if you offered the Cavs a chance to be in the Eastern Conference Finals before the season, they would have taken it. But I don't know if I'd do that trade again. Just with the age, although Garland is on a lot of money.
It's tough because Garland's another guy. I've just never been a really big fan of anybody the Cavs have. But Garland's another guy where it's just, I just don't see much with him. Especially dating back to that playoff series a couple years ago against the Knicks. He essentially lost them that series. He was not great at all. But I mean, I guess if knowing that they're not winning a championship out of it, because trading your younger point guard for a 38-year-old, that's a win now move. And if you're not going to win now out of it, I don't think they make that trade again just for a conference finals appearance.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think the Cavaliers fans that I know were signing up for championship or bust this season, which is a tough way to enjoy an NBA season. But I think that the Clippers made out really well by getting a young point guard that can really do damage from three-pointer and post really high true shooting percentage numbers. And I don't think that Darius Garland is a great fit next to Donovan Mitchell because I think there's too many defensive limitations between the two. But shout out to the Clippers for what they got with Darius Garland and what they got in the Zubac trade to get the top pick away from the Pacers.
I don't know. The Darius Garland contract is a bit brutal. He's not a good enough player to be making how much he's making. And he would have at least offered a lot more than James Harden. Well, if he was going to play, he would have offered a lot more than James Harden did. But I think that's enough about the Cavs. Their season's over. Bit of a disappointing end to it, but that's enough about the Cavs. What did you guys think of Cat in this series? I thought he was really good today, like really good. His three ball, I have utmost confidence in it. It feels like every time he shoots it, it's going to go in.
He looks really good. I remember it wasn't from tonight. I think it was either game 2 or 3 where Karl Anthony Towns blew by Donovan Mitchell. And I knew right then and there that he was feeling good. And I knew that Donovan Mitchell wasn't going to be playing great defense this series. But tonight, for anyone that watched after the whistle when Karl Anthony Towns threw down that windmill slam, and they even showed replays of it on ESPN, even though it didn't count, that's how you knew he was feeling it. And he feels like some of his best athletic self for his age.
It's also, he can now beat you in different ways. He can put up 25 in a game, and he can do that from in the paint or from behind the arc. And now he's added the passing to his game, which again, game 3, he had 7 assists. He had another 5 in game 1. And then we saw what he did, of course, against Philly and even Atlanta after we switched up the offense. I mean, obviously not really a crazy standout series from him, but he did pretty much all you could ask of from him. He wasn't in foul trouble a lot, which was good. One of my biggest issues with him coming off of the second round. But yeah, overall, it's no complaints from him. Really, no complaints for anybody, of course, in a suite. But I do think overall we'll need to see a little bit more out of him to win a championship. But for this series, he definitely did his job.
I'm glad you mentioned the fouls because the Spurs and the Thunder are both good at drawing fouls and both have guards that can put you in foul trouble. I don't think Cat is going to be able to afford any stupid fouls in the next round. He has to use all his fouls wisely. If he's playing against the Spurs, all those fouls have to be at the rim against Wemby. They can't be any of these, reaching fouls or trying to be too physical, offensive fouls. I know Cat did a great job in this series about limiting them, but I think that's something that we really need to make sure doesn't happen in the finals. Apart from that, was there anybody else that really stood out for you guys? I thought Josh Hart had a good series overall. I think he did great in his role. I think he's the sort of player that you want to play, that you're comfortable playing 30 minutes against any team. But if you go into a finals matchup, do you trust Hart to be able to stay on the court with his three-point shooting?
I'll take this one first because I'm very passionate about this. I do not. I think that there are 2 non-centers in the NBA, assuming Ben Simmons is not currently an NBA player, that you can fully ignore in a playoff series. I think if the player is a willing shooter, you should not be leaving them as wide open as the Cavs were leaving Josh Hart in game 2. No closeouts, no nothing. Of course, there are guys that you can sag off of and help off of, but we're also seeing it in the West with Alex Caruso, who was an even worse, a much worse 3-point shooter in the regular season than Josh Hart. You can't leave a guy that wide open. For the entire game, especially. I mean, like we said in game 2, it took Josh Hart a good amount of attempts to get going, but once he did, the Knicks pulled away and they just didn't look back. If I would love to get a wide open 3 pretty much for free against either the Spurs or the Thunder's defense. If that's what they want to do and that's what they want to give up to us, I'm perfectly fine with that.
What was that 2-player thing you mentioned?
The Thompson twins, just because they just don't shoot.
I was wondering. They were the first people that popped in my mind. That's funny. But anyways, I want to draw attention to Mitchell Robinson because we've had a rough going from him lately. He's been talking about dealing with some mental health troubles, and I hope that all is well to him and his family. But tonight was a really encouraging performance, and it was really vintage Mitchell Robinson. He wound up finishing with 5 offensive rebounds, which is what he was averaging about halfway into the season. He had 6 and 6 in his first 9 minutes tonight. And the way Perry said that Evan Mobley didn't strike fear into his heart if he was a Knicks player driving in the basket, Mitchell Robinson clearly altered some decisions that resulted in Cavs guards turning the ball over and getting the Knicks out in the break.
I think Mitchell Robinson is going to play a huge role in whoever comes out of the West, especially against the Spurs. I know we talked about this a bit off the podcast, but like we talked about before, how good Mitch was in the NBA Cup Finals. I think that's still the best way to guard Wemby. I think the Thunder have had the most success when they've been physical with him, and Mitch Robinson gives you that physicality that Cat doesn't. I think that Mitchell Robinson playing at his best is the only way the Knicks win a championship. He needs to be effective in his 15 to 20 minutes, no matter who they play. But I'm glad you brought him up, Myles. Craig, do you want to say anything about Mitchell Robinson, about his series, or about him in the finals?
Yeah, honestly, he has not done much these playoffs. Really, tonight was a good showing out of him. And like we said, he is going through whatever he is going through. But I don't think that he can really play more than 20 minutes a game super effectively in the finals. And one thing I am curious about is who you guys think guards Wemby in those non-Mitch minutes, especially like to start out the game as well, because Mitch comes off the bench. Statistically, OG Anunoby has been the best defender against Wemby since he entered the NBA. But we're seeing OKC have a lot more success with a bigger guy on him than they did with Caruso in game 1. Personally, I think we should start it off with OG, give our best defender first crack at him. But once that goes down, do you guys trust Cat to be
Well,
guarding
No.
Wemby one-on-one? Because I
my
don't.
question for
Not
you is, who is Karl Anthony Towns going to guard if he's not guarding Wemby? Is it going to be Champagny and he's going to be stuck on a shooter?
Champagny.
Is it going to be Castle and you're letting him get downhill and risking Towns getting blocking fouls? It's going to be Champagny.
It's got to be.
Well,
There's no other option.
Champagny hasn't shot the ball well in the in this conference finals, and he looks like a player who's not playing with a lot of confidence. I would not be that worried about having Cat on Champagny. The Thunder have effectively put Chet on him, and he hasn't really been able to take advantage of a lot of corner threes or anything like that. So I think that's where you end up with Cat on. I also think that I would start with OG. I'd obviously keep the starting lineup the same, but my first sub, the first guy off the bench for me in a Spurs series would have to be Mitchell Robinson. Although we are getting ahead of ourselves. We don't know. Jada might be back for game 5 and it might be the Thunder in the finals.
Yeah, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but it's nice to know that the Knicks have some options to mix it up between Mitchell Robinson, between OG Anunoby, and like we saw in that Sixers series, Ariel Huckporty looks like a more than viable candidate to play a couple minutes here and there to produce some physical defense. But
Also,
wow, I'm looking at
in a
Champagne's
game where
numbers right now. I'm sorry, Daniel.
yeah,
Champagne's numbers, I didn't realize how poor he shot from three this season on 32%. Or, no, that's the wrong Champagne. No wonder. That makes more
he
sense.
shot well this season, but in the conference finals, he hasn't really shot the ball well.
I was going to say, I
Even
thought
in
he
a
was an elite shooter, and now it makes a lot more sense. 38% from three on 6.2 attempts per game. Much better.
I mean, he is a great shooter, but I don't think he's the type of. I wouldn't be that worried. That would not be something that I go into the serious game planning. I think everything you have to start with making Wemby have to make a decision. That's still the game. That's still a part of his game where he's lacking the most. If you let Wemby play one-on-one against OG Anunoby, I don't think that's a recipe for success, personally. I also wanted to highlight that in a game where I think 50 Knicks got in, my boy Jeremy Sohan got another DNP. What's going on?
Yeah. I certainly don't have any passionate comments to make about Jeremy Sohan's playing time, but I will say that we saw a lot of Knicks play really well in their 8 minutes of garbage time. And specific shout out to Tyler Kolek for ever since he's left the rotation, he's looked like a man with the confidence that knows he's an NBA point guard and thinks it's comical that he's in garbage time and is excited to show everyone what he's got. And I think that's the Tyler Kolek we've seen almost all season.
Did I tell you, Miles, about how I FaceTime Jeremy Sohan?
Yeah, you did. I'm sorry. Don't tell him I had anything to say about my lack of passion for his minutes. He's a great guy, and you know what? It's nice knowing that you have a guy like him on your bench. Like if we had played Detroit, I would have expected maybe to see a minute or two of him the same way we see Jose Alvarado a little bit at a time. Maybe.
We can touch on GTA Alvarado. Do you think that he has any role to play in the finals, with regardless of who we play? 'Cause we've seen the Spurs; they've thrown out their own Jose Alvarado and Jordan McLaughlin for a couple minutes here and there. I think that still in these 2 3 minute bursts, he can be effective, especially if the other bench players aren't playing great.
Yeah, he definitely can be. We saw him get a steal in the backcourt today off a pretty lazy Donovan Mitchell pass. But then there's also times where it just looks like he shouldn't be in the NBA, let alone on the court in the playoffs. To the beginning of the fourth quarter, the game was pretty much over, and he had a few plays in a row that made me wonder if we should bring Jalen Brunson back in the game. I just couldn't. Sometimes you just don't know what he's doing out there. But again, as just like a 2 to 3 minute at a time kind of player, I think he'll be fine. I think he can make a play or two that'll give us an extra possession, but that's pretty much the extent of where he's at. I think he's a pretty clear number 9 on this team.
Yeah, there's a lot of times I'm wondering whether I even want to see any Alvarado minutes at all. But like Perry said, I like him in those 2 minute spurts at a time to play some full court defense, to apply some intensity to help get the Knicks started in the break, because watching him is a lot like watching Josh Hart in the sense that it's a love-hate relationship. Alvarado played 10 minutes tonight. He turned the ball over twice. Frustrating. He finished the day with a plus 21 plus minus in his 10 minutes. So the Knicks were objectively a better team tonight with Jose Alvarado on the court.
Yeah, I think him and McBride are where the minutes are going to be split the most. So, what did you guys think of McBride in this series?
I
I
don't
am a
think he
huge
shot it
McBride.
well.
Yeah, he
Sorry,
didn't
you can
shoot
go.
well, but 3 for 5 tonight from three, got to be encouraged because he's a very important player to this Knicks team. His shooting is him and Shamit, like Perry was talking about this movement shooting earlier. Those are the two guys that take the pressure off Mikal Bridges to be that guy, which I think has been a huge reason why he's been put under a microscope, Mikal Bridges, with all those draft picks.
And thank God, because I don't think I've seen Mikal Bridges hit a non-standstill three-pointer in my entire life. But yeah, Deuce, I think another big thing with him is his athleticism, his wingspan, his strength, and his hustle too. He plays a lot bigger than the 6'1" or 6'2" that he's listed at, which is
Mhm.
another big thing that allows him to play next to Brunson or Alvarado or any other small guard that we have out there. Yeah, again, with both teams, especially the Spurs having so many quick, athletic perimeter players, I think he's going to be another very key piece in the finals, like he has been in pretty much every playoff series we've played. There's always been a game or a quarter or a cup or any amount of time where it's, wow, Miles McBride should be getting more minutes, and he's carrying this offense or defense right now.
Yeah,
Mhm.
right. I have a
Mhm.
comment to make on McBride before we get into anything else. I don't remember when, but I remember they were surveying Knicks players of what players could play in another league, who's the most likely to be able to be a professional in another league. And I'm pretty sure the answer was almost unanimously Deuce McBride. And Deuce McBride himself saying he could have been a cornerback in the NFL. And tonight there was one play where he had his back turned, he didn't pick up the ball, he picked up his man, and he wound up intercepting the pass along the sidelines, and I thought it was very impressive tracking at full speed.
Yeah, Myles McBride is obviously hella athletic, like every single NBA player. But are there any rotation adjustments you want to see going into the finals? Or do you think Jalen Brunson's going to be playing around 40, 42 minutes? Or do you think it's going to be closer to the 36 he's played in this series?
I mean, I think it depends. If we manage to continue to win games by this much, I don't think he'll have to play that much, but I don't really see that happening against either team. The rotations are pretty matchup dependent. I think, like you said before, if we do play the Spurs, I would like to see a little bit more Mitch and Mitch a little bit earlier on in the game as well. Versus OKC, I would like for Mike Brown to not be scared to play double bigs against their double big lineups and even against their smaller lineups, to take advantage of the extra size, which he did turn to a little bit this series, but still not as much as I would have liked. But overall, I think the guys playing are good. I think the amount of minutes that most guys are playing is good as well. In normal non 40-point wins at least.
Miles? Miles, are you
I don't
there?
really have any. Yeah, I'm here. I just don't really have any comments to make on that.
You'd keep the rotation as is?
We don't know who we're going to play yet, and it'll depend on what we're seeing, but I'm very much anticipating seeing how much or how many minutes Jalen Brunson plays on any given night because I feel like we'll get somewhere between that 36 to 42-minute range. I don't know where. I wouldn't think it'd be 42, but Mike Brown might just be taking this OKC or San Antonio team just a little bit more seriously as to maybe seeing less Jose Alvarado. I don't know.
I do think
Yeah.
in terms of the rotation, I don't want to go as far as to say as the Knicks have the best role players in the league. They might. That's another conversation. But I think the Knicks pretty clearly have the most role players, and that's everybody pretty much outside of the starting lineup. I think they have the most bench guys that can just flat out win you a game in the entire NBA. I think we've seen Mitch do it with his offensive rebounds. We've seen him completely turn games. We've seen Deuce have games where he makes 7 threes and wins it for us. We've seen Landry Shamet make 12 out of 13 threes in a series. It's just an absurd amount of guys that can beat you in so many different ways. And I think that's going to be something huge. We're going to need a 7 offensive rebound game out of Mitch to win a game in the finals. Or we're going to need Deuce or Shamet to make 5 or 6 or 7 threes to win us a game. And I think that could be the difference between us winning the finals and losing the finals, in all honesty.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
what made this series so impressive to me is that I think that we're in the era in every sport of where the talent gap is the most closed it's ever been because we're in a world of information and a world in where we understand just anatomy and we understand how exercise builds muscle and affects athletic performance and that we just saw this Knicks team lay on how many games in a row is this now? 11?
11.
11
Yeah.
games in a row. Exactly. And to see dominance like this or domination in the way that the Knicks have shown in the 2026 playoffs in this era, it's just very impressive.
Yeah, I also think that before we get on to previewing any finals, I think it's going to be a great opportunity for game one to test the old rust versus rest, rust versus rest argument. The Thunder were rested before they played the Spurs in game one, and the Spurs were coming off a quite difficult series against the Timberwolves, although the last 2 games weren't. But is that what you're looking forward to in game one? Do you think the rest versus rust argument is going to be prevalent? Because I think that with the amount of rest the Knicks are going to get, I know the finals are kicking off in 8 days. So the Knicks are going to have 8 full days to, rest and recover. Do you think game one is really the game that we need to target to get home court in the finals?
Yeah, I did mention that a little bit earlier. This episode in game one, we came out a little bit flat.
Mhm.
We're not making shots. Again, OG was just coming off an injury, and there were different circumstances, but I do hope that we come out a little bit better. If both the Spurs and the Thunder, who are both a little bit banged up, go 7, I'm of course very happy with that. And I definitely do think that the rest gives us an advantage, especially over the course of the series, because I think the Cavs also got a little bit more tired as the series went on. But yeah, I think rest takes that pretty much every time. And one thing I know we are going to preview the finals later on, so I'll touch on this more then, but I do not think that Wemby's stamina is at the point that it needs to be for a deep finals run, especially if they go 7 against OKC and win. I think that's something that we're going to end up seeing in the finals, that his stamina is not where it should be, but more on that later.
I think it's going to be interesting to see how the Knicks not having home court advantage in the NBA Finals is going to affect them, because getting off to that slow start against Cleveland in game one was potentially discouraging, especially on your home court. But either you could look at it two ways. You can look at it as there's less pressure to get off to that hot start because you're on the road, or more pressure because you're facing a better team and you can't afford to be giving them anything. Not better team than you,
I
better team than you've played.
Yeah, I wouldn't be so, so convinced that it's always rest is always better than rust, because if you look at the Thunder, they did also sweep their first 2 series. So over the course of the playoffs now, if they go 7 against the Spurs, they're going to have played one extra game than the Knicks. So their entire playoff run is going to be, quite similar in the amount of fatigue they've gone through. I think that game one is going to be a real test to see if the Knicks can actually, come out and be not just competitive, but really be favorites to win the series. I think game one is definitely a game where the Knicks need to go out and give it, like, put everything, play it as if it's a must-win game almost. But I think we go on to previewing the finals. Who would you guys rather play? I think I'll let you guys take it first, and I have my own opinion. But who do you guys rather play in the finals, the Spurs or the Thunder?
Keep wavering, but I'm going to lean towards playing the Spurs. I know that they have the most daunting paint protector in maybe NBA history, but I do feel like they lack the 3-point shooting that OKC could potentially formulate in some creative lineups to keep up with New York.
Yeah, I think it does depend. Like, I don't want to use that kind of cop-out answer, but it really does on the health of both J-Dub and AJ Mitchell, who I'm pretty sure Mitchell's already ruled out for Game 5. If we do end up playing OKC and their only on-ball creator is SGA and maybe a little bit of Jared McCain, I think I would rather that. But again, on the other side, the Spurs, Fox has been hurt, and we saw Harper leave a game pretty early. So I'm really at the point where I like the Knicks' chances against both teams. I'm going to just touch on Wemby's stamina a little bit more, because I thought in Game 3 he was gassed. The whole game he did not look like he was playing an NBA game, and I think that has a lot to do with the fact that he's really never played this many minutes in such a short span in his career. And I think, again, that's another thing that this Knicks team, who is very conditioned and very well rested, is going to be able to take advantage of, again, with the fast pace and the movement that we're playing with. But again, I think fully healthy, I would rather play the Spurs, but just by a little bit.
And what I feel good about if I'm the Knicks going against the Spurs is that they have some of the best mid-range shooters in basketball, between Jalen Brunson, between Mikal Bridges. Hell, Josh Hart and OG Anunoby knock down mid-ranges at a pretty good clip. And then Karl Anthony Towns obviously will stretch you out to a lot further than mid-range. But Wemby's going to have to make some decisions, and he's going to have to make them fast on defense. And we'll see. Worst case scenario, I'm not worst case scenario, of course, but the Spurs try and regulate teams to turn them into 3-point shooting teams. But the Knicks tonight shot 44% from 3. The Knicks, just like the Pacers last year, and that's how they got to the finals, are not afraid to lean on that 3-point ball.
I think that, like Perry said, the injuries are probably the most important factor in who I would rather play. I think the Spurs look like the healthier team right now. I was looking at the injury report for tomorrow, and Jalen Williams is now questionable for injury management, not for anything to do with his hamstring. So if I had to guess, I think he'll play in Game 5. How effective he'll be is another question, but Game 5 seems to be sort of a make or break game for OKC, and I would predict that Jalen Williams plays. I think that if both J-Dub and AJ Mitchell are healthy for the finals, which kicking off in 8 days, there's probably a good chance that both would be back if the Thunder make it. I think that you're looking at the Spurs as the team that you're looking to face. I also think that the big reason why we saw in game 3, the Spurs are still lacking that sort of experience that the Knicks have and that the Thunder have. I wouldn't trust them to be able to really close the door on any game in the finals. I'd always back the Knicks to always have a chance if it's 10 points going into the fourth quarter or 12 points. I think that sort of lack of experience and obviously Wemby's conditioning is why I think the Spurs are a better matchup for the Thunder. I don't know if you guys saw game 3, but you could really see that the Spurs they still lack something on the execution part that only comes with time.
Yeah, I'm looking at J-Dub's stats right now and seeing that he shot 29.9% from three on 2.3 3-point attempts per game. And it feels like he faces a lot of the same limitations that Josh Hart does as an NBA player. Where, like we were talking about earlier, Perry said that these guys are NBA players, they're world-class athletes. You can't just leave them wide open from three and set it and forget it. So I'm not suggesting that the Knicks do that with Jalen Williams. But in the flow of the offense, is he going to take 10 3-pointers in a game? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I think both teams really struggle with shooting, and the Thunder definitely less. But I think overall, neither team really has the shot making that the Knicks do from top to bottom. I do think that I completely lost my train of thought, so somebody else talk.
Yeah, well,
Right.
I'll jump in. I think I think comparing Josh Hart to Jalen Williams is not exactly fair. Jalen Williams is an All NBA player. He's obviously a better player than Josh Hart. I know you didn't say that they were the same player. You just in their role in the offense. Jalen Williams is a lot better with the ball than Josh Hart is. Obviously, Josh Hart isn't going to have the ball really. He's not going to be someone that's running a lot of pick and rolls. Jalen Williams is. I think for the Knicks, if they play the Thunder, the biggest matchup will be who's the better player between Jalen Williams and OG Anunoby. OG Anunoby has been the better player these playoffs, but Jalen Williams came out into the playoffs and he was hot. He was playing extremely well against the Suns. I think that's sort of the matchup that I want to target. I would have OG Anunoby on Jalen Williams and really try to take him out of the game completely. Because if you can take their secondary creator out of the game and let Shea do whatever he's going to do, I think that's the recipe for success.
Yeah, this year, Jalen Williams, or J-Dub as I should call him, given that's what everyone seems to call him, he had a true shooting percentage of 560 this season, which for anyone that doesn't know, Jalen Brunson and a lot of the premier guards in the NBA, 580 is on the lower end. A lot of them, if they have a 600 plus true shooting percentage, that's pretty impressive efficiency. And this year it was 560 for J-Dub. Last year it was 573. His sophomore year, 621, and his rookie year, 601. So he's been on a bit of a decline with his efficiency. But if he can get back to that J-Dub that in his second year shot 42.7% from three on 5.2 attempts per game, then yeah, we're talking about a player that's really going to affect the game on offense. And we know he's an all defensive player, of course.
I mean, we saw J-Dub last year. There were some questions if he was going finals MVP over Shea after he had 40 points in game 5. I think we shouldn't underrate just how good J-Dub was last year and in the playoff run just because he's had a bit of an underwhelming season. I still think that he's going to be someone that the Knicks have to take away if they want to beat the Thunder.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I do appreciate OG Anunoby's size advantage guarding J-Dub. So I think that's a certainly plausible factor that the Knicks can take him away and that be a real detriment to the Thunder offense.
One thing I do want to bring up with OKC, SGA is not having that great of a playoff run. He's had a lot of subpar games, and of course defenses are fully loaded up on him. But he's had 3 games against this Spurs team shooting 40% or less, and the one game that he didn't, he was exactly at 50%. He had a couple of bad games against the Lakers, who again were pretty much loading up entirely on him. But with the lack of other options that the Thunder have in a half-court offense, especially if J-Dub and AJ Mitchell either re-aggravate their injuries or just don't come back at all, I think we definitely can see the Knicks loading up on SGA and forcing some of those other guys to beat us.
I think that's a great point.
Taking him out.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think Stephon Castle has shown that the way that you're playing in the playoffs right now, the physicality allowed on Shea is really quite extreme. If the Knicks end up playing the Thunder, Mikal Bridges has to match that level of physicality if he's guarding Shea. He's seen Stephon Castle is hand checking him, two hands on his chest, stuff that would get called fouls in the regular season, and the refs are letting him play. And I think that's really why SJ has been subpar, at least from an efficiency point. I would also worry though if J-Dub is back and AJ Mitchell is back, if you load up too much on SGA, like we saw in Game 3, his playmaking has really improved. He doesn't really turn the ball over. That's where I think between the Thunder and Knicks matchup, the turnovers are going to be the key determinant of who's winning the series. If the Thunder take care of the ball and force the Knicks into a lot of turnovers, I think the Thunder win the series. And if the Knicks take care of the ball and don't give the Thunder sort of those easy fast break points, I think that's where the Knicks can really have a lot of success. And with Jalen Brunson, I do think that he can be a bit turnover prone at times, but if he's playing at his best, we know how efficient he can be.
Yeah, if you go to NBA or if you go to Basketball Reference and filter NBA players by their advanced stats and go to turnover percentage, you'll see some of the best turnover percentages are all 3-point shooters who just catch and shoot and they don't waste time making that extra pass. And then you'll see Shai Gilgeous-Alexander smack dab in the middle of that. So what I'm potentially looking forward to if the Thunder are to advance to face the Knicks is, are the Knicks going to be able to force him into those same turnovers that they're able to get out of Donovan Mitchell, they're able to get out of James
Mhm.
Harden, all these other guys, because Shai Gilgeous-Alexander moves at a different speed compared to these guys.
We've done a lot of talking about these two other teams, but I think we should focus a little bit on the Knicks as well. Specifically, first Jalen Brunson. I think both teams have guys that are just great matchups for him. The Spurs with Castle, who I was very impressed by in the regular season, and of course the Thunder with Caruso, Dort, Casey Wallace, and their whole array of perimeter defenders. I don't really think either team outside of maybe Carter Bryant has the type of bigger, longer defender that Jalen Brunson typically struggles with. Maybe J-Dub, who's really not that tall, but he is long and, of course, a great defender. There are like just some matchups that I am wondering about. If Mikal can continue to play the way he's been playing, I assume the Thunder put SGA on him to start.
Mhm.
Not even to the point where SGA is a bad defender, but I think it's very important to keep him involved on defense, just so to not give him the time off on that side of the ball. And then again with San Antonio, De'Aaron Fox, he's got great hands. He's good at stealing the ball, but he's not the greatest defender. Champagnie as well. Champagnie has actually been playing pretty good defense in the playoffs, but he's not. I don't believe he's the strongest defender. Both teams, I think, do have weaknesses, and I am very curious about how the matchups do end up playing out.
I think we've also seen how bad the Thunder starting lineup is. I think if they make the finals, that's going to be an adjustment they make. I don't think they're going to be starting Lu Dort. I think these playoffs have been quite crucial to show that Lu Dort's probably not going to be on the Thunder for much longer. I think they've evolved past the need for his elite defense with players that can also give you 95% of what Lu Dort can give you defensively, but 20 or 30% more offensively. So I think if the Thunder go and make the finals, there's going to be a big adjustment in their starting lineup. I know we're going to play our boy I Heart, and I think the double big lineup for the Thunder is something that's also important to mention quickly. I think if the Thunder go double big, we could be seeing the Knicks try to match it with double big. Or do you guys not think that's going to be something that Mike Brown is really going to pull out?
Well, we'll definitely see some of it, but I'm wondering how early we'll see that because in this Cavs series, Mike Brown came out of the gates with not afraid to put OG Anunoby on a center, and that's what we saw for most of the series. We didn't see that much two big men, but we saw a little bit. But I agree with what you were saying about Lou Dort, and I think in today's NBA, on offense, you're only as strong as your weakest link. And so I don't think that Brunson ball is going to be enough to overcome those perimeter defenders that we're talking about. But I think that if OKC wants to leave Lou Dort out there on the court, then I think it's going to severely cost them on the offensive end. I know last night I looked up at the scoreboard in the fourth quarter of the OKC game, and they had 68 points. That's not going to fly against this Knicks offense. I don't care
Or
who
is there
you're
anything you
playing.
want?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that you mentioned OG and Anunoby being put on center. I think if you put OG on a center against the Thunder, it's a waste. But if you put him against Wemby, I think that's a matchup that we're definitely going to see. So I think Mike Brown has to be, very particular in who he's having his best defender guard.
Right. And Perry, before you weigh in, I wanted to mention that last year, I'll take us back to that Pacer series where we were facing Tyrese Halliburton. And we started out with it being a lot of Deuce McBride on him at one point, or I don't remember if we started. No, we started with Mikal Bridges, and that wasn't enough. We tried Deuce McBride, and he wasn't tall enough or long enough. And then we went to OG Anunoby, and I'm wondering if we're going to get there quicker with Shea Gilgeous-Alexander.
As for the double big lineups, I do want to see a little bit more of it because, again, like you said, I don't really want to see OG on either Chet or iHeart. I do think that is a waste against the Thunder. On the other side, I do wonder who Chet is going to end up guarding. I mean, I would assume he starts on Hart and then he just roams, but not entirely sure what happens there. As for OG guarding SGA, I mean, the way Mikal Bridges is playing defense, I don't really see a need for that as of now. And I do like what Daniel said about having OG on J-Dub and just trying our hardest to take him out of the game and just leaving SGA as their sole shot creator. But again, I do think we have a lot of bodies to throw at both teams' guards, whether it be Mikal, Shamet, Deuce, or even Josh Hart, who's taken some bigger matchups. He was the one on CJ McCollum, who honestly has been the scariest player we faced these playoffs.
So, Perry, I got a question for you then. So let's say we're facing OKC in the championship, and the Knicks are facing Chet and Isaiah Hartenstein on the court at the same time against our starters. If OG Anunoby is guarding J-Dub, then who's guarding Chet and who's guarding Hartenstein?
That's the issue. Against the starting lineup, you really have no choice because Josh Hart is not. I think Josh Hart does a better job against J-Dub than he does against, of course, either of the Thunder bigs who have almost a foot on him. But that's why I did want to see a little bit more of the double big lineup to be able to avoid that. But again, like I've said, and like you guys have said as well, Mitch is not going to be a 30-minute per game player. But I do think in that time that he is on the court in a hypothetical matchup against OKC, that that's going to be very crucial to us. I think those will be where our biggest runs are.
Right. And you know that J-Dub has those broad shoulders. And so as great as the defender as Landry Shamet's been or Mikal Bridges has been, like, we'll see if on switches they're big enough to guard him, or Josh Hart even though Josh Hart's a strong fella for his 6'4", however tall he is.
Yeah, there definitely isn't one solution for either of these teams. That's what makes them so great. That's also what makes me pretty happy that I'm not the Knicks coach right now. There is definitely a lot to think about and a lot of things that I don't have answers for and things that I hope Mike Brown does find an answer for.
And a lot of film time in the next 8 days.
Yeah.
Sorry, Daniel, go ahead. What were you saying?
No, I was just going to say if there was anything else that you guys wanted to touch on before we get out of here. I don't think we need to do a finals prediction yet. I think we'll be back before to preview the finals when we know who they're playing, if it's the Spurs or the Thunder. But anything else that you guys want to touch on before we get out of here?
Yeah, I have one note, and it was about the Mitchell Robinson minutes if we are to get that San Antonio matchup, because Luke Cornett, he's really struggled on the court in these playoffs, but he's undoubtedly one of the best backup bigs in basketball, and he's great at a lot of the things that Mitchell Robinson's great at, and he might kill you if Mitchell Robinson's not matching those minutes out there with him. So we'll see how much of Mitch on Wemby we get versus how much of Mitch on Luke Cornett we get if we are to see Knicks Spurs.
Perry?
No, not much. I do think the physicality you mentioned OKC's playing with against Wemby, I do think maybe OG Anunoby wouldn't be able to match the height or the size on him, but I do think the physicality, he is one of the strongest players in the league. Hopefully the refs allow him to play physical, and if they do, I think he'll be, I don't want to say fine on Wemby, but I think he'll be as good as you can get really on Wemby in those non-Mitch minutes.
Yeah. I think whoever plays with the most physicality in the finals is going to be the team that ends up winning. And I do think that the Knicks, unlike previous Knicks teams, have that sort of grit and edge, and they have the skill to match it. But I think that's all for us, right, guys? Yeah. So Mark and Jay are going to be back with their preview or their review of the Cavs-Knicks series tomorrow. Make sure you're subscribing to Mark and Jay's comedy podcast, The Brink of Sanity, and Jay's horror movie podcast, Through Basket Cases. I think the links are going to be in the description. And let's all go Knicks. We're on to the finals for the first time in this century. I think we should all take a moment to reflect and be happy and really show how far this team has come under Leon Rose. Go Knicks.
4 more wins.
4 more wins.
All right, take care.
All right. See you guys.